It's Console Crapshoot, the thing where we spin a wheel to play a random video game on original hardware. Let's cut right to it. We've got 27 consoles on the wheel currently. That's going to go up soon, but let's see what we get today. The Sega Genesis. This was my main as a kid, so I'm always happy to see it come up on the wheel. The Genesis was known as the Mega Drive outside of the US, and we have 704 games on this wheel. The Death and Return of Superman. The comic book event that this was based on was a pretty big deal when I was a kid. This game, however, didn't make much of a splash. I remember renting it from Blockbuster and not being too impressed. So yeah, like I said, this was a huge event in comics. Not just for me as an 11-year-old at the time, but it was all over the news. There was SNL sketches about it, and it seemed like every single one of your friends had a copy of this comic book in pristine plastic, and they didn't want you to bend the pages or get your fingerprints on it because they were convinced that it would be worth money someday. Problem with that is, and kids don't really understand economics, is if they print millions of copies and everyone has a copy that they keep in pristine condition, it's not going to be worth much. But everyone was convinced that they had a future $1 million under their bed. First part was the death, second part was the funeral, and the third part was called The Reign of the Supermen, which was interesting. It was like a big mystery at the time. Superman dies, Doomsday kills him, and then these 4 new kind of Supermen show up, and they all kind of claim to be Superman, and no one knows which one is the real Superman. Spoiler alert, none of them were. Just going from my memory, I remember the cyborg Superman was like an astronaut or something. He got turned into a cyborg, and he turned evil. You had this guy, the Eradicator.
I am the Eradicator!
He was like a Kryptonian AI that took the form of Superman or something. You had Superboy, turned out he was a clone that was part Lex Luthor, I think. And then you had the Man of Steel, who turned out to be Shaquille O'Neal. This is another side-scrolling beat-em-up. We had one last week. It's not a great one. It's pretty basic. My problem with most Superman games is the limitations. This guy's throwing a Molotov cocktail at you, and it's knocking you down and killing you. That's a little silly if you're Superman. This other guy's shooting just guns at you and hurts you and kills you. Not accurate if we're talking Superman. You can fly, so that's cool. I didn't realize until after I played through the entire game that you can throw people into the background, so that's kind of fun. Once you get after the first mission, Superman actually does die, and it skips right to the part of the comics where these 4 Supermen come out, and you play as all 4 of them, which is somewhat fun. They all have their own variation on movesets, their own special moves. You start with the cyborg guy, and yes, he does go evil. I remembered that correctly. I think my favorite guy to be is the
Eradicator!
He just looks cooler and more interesting, and his moves are more interesting. All of their projectile, like blaster weapons, even Superman's heat vision, does almost no damage, which sucks. I mean, it should rip people in half. I'd say the game is a little bit punishing. It's not very balanced. It's painstakingly difficult. I got through it because I got impatient and I used codes. I wanted to see the whole game, but try beating this for real. The bosses are a little too cheesy. You take a lot of bullshit hits. Also, the flying levels are a nice change up, although those are the complete opposite. They're too easy, but they changed the pace a little bit. The thing I thought was the most lazy was at the end of the game. The real Superman resurrects. He comes back, just like in the comics, and he has a mullet and his black suit, and it's very exciting. But he only has his mullet in the cutscenes. The developers, Blizzard by the way, were too lazy to reanimate Superman's moves, so then when he comes back, he's just got a haircut all of a sudden, and then afterward, you have your mullet again in the cutscenes. I'm not gonna lie, I feel robbed of playing as mullet Superman. But what are you gonna do? Alright, what did we think of the Death and Return of Superman for the Sega Genesis? Well, we've played much worse, and there's way worse Superman games. Maybe we'll get to that one day. But it's pretty weak. It looks like it's gonna be fun, it looks pretty cool, and it's extremely mediocre. This is an early console game from a great PC developer, Blizzard, who's known for World of Warcraft amongst many other things. But it's not good, it's not bad, it's just kind of fine. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5. Seems like Superman is the hardest comic book hero to make work in a video game. He's an invulnerable character who, you have to make vulnerable to chainsaws and Molotov cocktails. Some Superman games you need a key to open a door. That's silly, you're Superman, just open the damn door. They figured out how to make him interesting in the comics, and Doomsday, while he's a silly character, is a valid threat. I mean, he was crazy experiment involving a baby that is killed over and over again and evolved to be indestructible. That's insane, but still a credible and believable threat. Superman can be a really interesting character with a lot of twists and turns, but they have yet to figure it out in video games. I really hope they do one day. But we've got to move on. We've got other games to play. Next week is another week. Can't wait to see what we're going to play then. Hope you'll join us. See you then.